Alright guys, welcome to Civil Analytics for Knicks fans. Our show today was brought to you by Virex PPE. When you're out there, make sure you protect yourself. Get a mask from virexppe.com. We would like to thank them for sponsoring our first video. When you get a chance, guys, please make sure you hit the thumbs up button for us, subscribe, and also share this video. Would really love it and would really appreciate it if you can do that for us. Alright, let's get right into it. So the first thing, the reason why I started making this video, because I making videos about Knicks analytics, was because I didn't see a lot of videos out there that basically took advanced analytics or advanced statistics from either Basketball Reference or from any other source in order to analyze our past and present moves by the New York Knicks. And so that's one of the reasons why I decided to do this. I didn't see a lot of people doing it, and so I just wanted to do it. Kind of, giving the highlight of my feelings on advanced analytics. I feel like it's a mixed bag, honestly. I mean, there's been some really cool developments, and then there's a lot of improvement that needs to be done in terms of analytics. I do think it's a little overhyped. Although I feel like it's very overhyped, there has been some pretty cool developments. Like, for example, I really like some of the things around individual that gives you insight on individual players, like knowing like their effective field goal percentage and true shooting percentage. I like those developments, and so I think those are really cool. I mean, there's also other developments that kind of give you a feel about give you better insight on more on team chemistry. But some of those statistics, they try to use it and assign it to actual individual players, and I think that's usually wrong. I feel like some of those statistics that they try to assign to individual players, that really because the impact of some of those stats are really the factor for some of those stats are really based on the other players that are on the court. So I just some of those things, some of those other stats I feel like are a little misleading, and it doesn't give you a lot of insight on individual players, how effective they are. But some of those stats, like I said, does give you pretty good insight on the chemistry on the 5 players that are on the floor together. It gives you a lot of insights on those 5 players. So I think that is also really cool. Some of the things that I think that are overhyped about it in the past was the three-point shooting. Although I've started to come around on it, I used to feel very differently about three-point shooting. And I also feel some teams still misuse three-point shooting. They do. Some of the teams that, some of them, especially in the playoffs, I think they should not place a lot of their hope on three-point shooting in the playoffs. If you're not shooting well above the league average from the three-point line, I personally feel that your team should not spend too much time shooting threes, especially the Rockets. You can see they've tried it and it really bites them in the butt in the playoffs repeatedly. And so, honestly, I think, and that's because if you think about it, players, they go through slumps and they go through hot waves. And so, although, for example, they said if you 33% shooting from the three-point line is equivalent to 50% field goal from within the three-point line. So when you look at that statistics, that looks extremely compelling. But if you look at how people really shoot, people go through slumps, and so you can have guys go through like a 10-game stretch when they're shooting in their 20s, like 20%, and then they may get out of that slump and then start shooting in the high 30s or even 40%, even with some good players, even 50%. So it's I feel like that's sort of a mixed bag. I am starting to come around on that, only for some teams. Like if you're the Golden State Warriors and you know who on your team is a good three-point shooter, and you have a Steph Curry and a Klay Thompson, they're shooting like around 40% and above from three-point range. When you have 2 players like that shooting 40% from three-point range at that volume, averaging that many points, I mean, yeah, you're going to three-point shooting is going to matter, and it's going to help you win a lot of ball games. But there's not a lot of Golden State Warriors out there, and so I feel like teams should be very careful with three-point shooting. But I don't want to get too far in the weeds into my opinion on analytics. I'm really here to discuss in our first video. I really wanted us to discuss Scott Perry and whether or not the Knicks should have kept him as GM. And one of the reasons why was because I would assume he was very he was because he was the general manager, so I would assume he had a lot of input into a lot of decisions that were made about the organization. Although Steve Mills had the final say-so, would have probably had the final sign-off, but I would assume that Scott Perry would have been advising him very closely. They seem to be joined at the hip. um, and they seemed to be making a lot of decisions together. And it seemed like Steve Mills brought him there specifically for his guidance and his guidance essentially. And so we're going to take a look at two of the major things in order for us to figure out whether or not Scott Perry should have been fired or kept on as general manager. We're going to look at two things that I felt like that was a huge problem for the Knicks over the past 2 years. The first one was, for me, was coaching. The coaching decision, them hiring David Fisdale. It would be nice to know what persuaded them, what kind of pushed them towards hiring David Fisdale. And then the second thing was the player development. And as a lot of you saw or a lot of the players we drafted in 2018, it seemed like they all took a step back in 2019. Either that or they were playing much less minutes. The only one that I felt like that didn't really take a step back was probably Frank Ntilikina. But he didn't get a lot of consistent minutes either. But a lot of our young guys didn't get consistent minutes. And they haven't gotten consistent minutes over the past 2 years. And so that's been a huge question around the organization. And, that Scott Perry, I'm sure he had a lot of input on whether or not these guys should or should not get minutes and around their development. And so let's get into it. Honestly, with the David Fisdale hire, so the first issue obviously was the coaching hire, and that was David Fisdale. And with the David Fisdale hire, I think they hired him because he was a great interview. David Fisdale is a very smart guy. He's a great interview, and he really knows how to tell you. He tells you exactly what you want to hear, and I think he knows how to. He does his research. He knows who he's interviewing with, and most of these guys do. But I think he just David Fisdale is like it's a rare gift that he has where it seems like he can sell just about anything, and so he was able to sell himself to this Knicks organization. Although he has very limited experience, they did take a huge chance on him, and also he was fired from a winning organization, an organization that was doing pretty well when he took it over, and in his second season, after the organization started going. Some of the veterans basically, when they lost a couple of their veterans and they had to depend more on younger players, they started to struggle, and it kind of really revealed that David Fisdale was a very young coach that still needed a lot of work, a lot of experience. But the Knicks seemed to have ignored his pitfalls with the Memphis Grizzlies and decided to give him a shot. And I get it because he seems like he's a great interview, and I'm sure he said all the right things. Really knocked the socks off of Scott Perry and Steve Mills. And honestly, I was one of the people. I really loved everything that he was saying when they first hired him. I mean, he was using a lot of, even his introductory press conference, he used a lot of, he said a lot of things that got people excited. I remember, he told Moutier, we're going to get you right, kid. And he talked a lot about playing defense and playing hard. And he used words like, phrases like, he wouldn't kill. And so a lot of us felt that this young team, was going to be coach hard and they were going to play hard. And they were not going to get minutes if they weren't going to play defense. And if they didn't show that they were going to, play defense and play hard in practice. And I loved everything he had to say. I really did. So I was one of the people that basically drank the Kool-Aid, drank the whole damn pitcher of Kool-Aid. Everything this guy was serving in the beginning, I really drank it all up and loved it. But honestly, it didn't take very long before I realized we were in trouble. And I suspect it didn't take a lot of people very long to figure out that, David Fisdale was not a very good coach. And it was very early on in his first season when I saw a ton of I saw a major red flag. I didn't see a ton of major red flags, but I saw one major one that was that was very troubling. And it was basically the things that he would say during press conferences did not line up to what you saw on the floor. And I'm not talking about him saying these guys are going to play well and we're going to win ball games, and that's what we saw on the floor. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm really talking more about he talked a lot about the team playing defense, and that if you weren't going to play defense and if you were going to play hard, you were not going to get minutes. And so early on, he did not play. A defensive lineup. I'm trying to remember if there's even one person in the starting lineup that was a good defender. I'm trying to think. Maybe Thomas. wasn't a starting lineup in the beginning of the year. He was a pretty decent defender, but I couldn't remember. Maybe Vonleh, actually, possibly Vonleh. Actually, no. Did Vonleh start? I'm trying to remember if he started or not. But either way, he did try that when the season first began. He played a lineup that didn't play much defense at all. And I think it was like game 3 or game 4. He switched it up and started playing a more defensive lineup. That I think that featured more Frank Ntilikina and Damian Dotson. And I think they won a couple of games, maybe 1-1, lost 1, 1-1. And then I think they lost like another 2 or 3. And then he went away from that lineup and just never really returned to like anything that was remotely a defensive lineup. And so what that told me was he was just talking the game about playing defense. He knew that's what the old time Knicks did, the '90s Knicks did. He knows that's what the fans in New York love, a team that plays defense. And so he was just just serving up cheesecake to the crowd and giving us a bunch of Kool-Aid to go along with it, and we were drinking it up. And but it wasn't for very long though, and because so what that told me when he went away from the defensive lineup and then went back to it was he just he did not he cared more about losing pretty than losing ugly. And what I mean by that was like the defensive lineup, the games were a little more closer, and more competitive than the other lineup that he normally would play, the non-defensive lineup. The non-defensive lineup would get blown out. Like by the third quarter, we're basically getting blown out. Fourth quarter, the game will be over. It'll be a wrap. Not even competitive. But with the defensive lineup, it was just like the game will sort of like get out of hand a little bit in the third quarter, or even late third quarter, and then they'll fight back in the fourth quarter. But it wasn't a blow. It wasn't like always a blowout, right? It was always kind of like in a manageable distance. Maybe they'll get down like 8 to 12 points and then try to fight back. But it was just an ugly type of game, man. It seems like he wasn't interested in giving that product to the fans. He didn't want an ugly product with on the floor with the fans, with them losing. He thought he just didn't want to give that to the fans. And in some ways, I get it a little bit, but I get what he was trying to do, but I still think it was wrong. You have to play your most optimal lineup. Even if it looks ugly, you always have to go with your most optimal lineup. And he never did. And it kind of like the switch he made around game 3 or game 4 early last season, it's for me just kind of like signaled that I think he understood what the optimal lineup was, but he just didn't want to play it because how it looked, because it just looked ugly. And so it was just, it was pretty painful. By the time we got into the second season, towards the end of last season, I didn't watch a lot of games because that's just how bad it was, especially the lack of defense. It was just the young players, they just looked lost. They didn't look like they were very well coached. I can understand not having the proper skill sets, but there's another thing but what about preparation? Knowing where you have to be on the floor. What about even having offensive sets? Running some offense. So it just it was ugly. Fizdale's first year. By the time the second year rolled around, there were some things to look forward to, but in terms of coaching, I was very. It was pretty dark for me. I knew that it was possible we were going to have a very ugly season, or the other option I was thinking like maybe Fizdale wakes up because he's got some more veterans now, and maybe he wakes up and start running a better offense, playing a more defensive lineup, and just kind of coach these guys up and do a better job. But that did not happen in the second season. In the second season, it was probably uglier than the first, in my opinion. It was worse because a lot of our, like for example, Kevin Knox, Ben Smith Jr., the guys that we drafted from the prior years and we traded for from the prior years just looked worse this year. And also, they weren't even getting as much, they was getting way less minutes. And so it seemed like our young guys, it just looked like they regressed. And we were just getting blown out a lot. We just were not competitive. And honestly, the players we had on the floor, I'm not saying we're going to make it to the playoffs, but those players, that wasn't like a 17-win ball club. Those players that we have on the New York Knicks, that's just not what we have. And everyone knew David Fizdale was just doing a terrible job by the second year, and even you can see the look on the face of Scott Perry and Steve Mills. But it's really interesting to understand what happened during this time frame. What did Scott Perry do to help mitigate some of this disaster? What did he do? Did he consult with Fizdale? But we don't know. There's just not enough information to let us know what was going on. But it's a little difficult, although there's not much information, but it's very difficult for me to believe that Steve Mills made a lot of these decisions in the vacuum all by himself without any input from like his advisor, especially his number one guy, Scott Perry. That so it's really interesting to kind of see what transpired during the second season. And so coaching was horrendous, and we don't know exactly what impact Scott Perry had on the decision to hire David Fizdale. I did know we moved on for David Fizdale very early during the second season, which I thought was the right move. I thought that was a very good move. So the next issue that we had was it was all around player development. Like I said, during the second season was very depressing for me. And one of the reasons that one of the things that really depressed me about the second season was it was really Dennis Smith Jr. I'm more of a Frank Ntilikina fan, honestly. But I was excited that we had Dennis Smith Jr. that we were able to get him from that trade. And I did feel that Dennis Smith Jr. He has a lot of talent and he has a ton of upside, and I've just always felt that he just needs the proper coaching. And I did believe and feel that he was going to be a pretty special player with the right coaching, and with some hard work. And when guys are that young and these guys, I think they're fairly committed and devoted to the game. So as long as you have the right coaching and the right plan, I think Dennis Smith Jr. could be a really nice NBA player, really special player in my opinion. And it seemed like it was actually one of the things I was looking forward to in the second season was Dennis Smith Jr. what impact he would have on the team. And it seemed that like he was working on his game over the summer. We heard a lot about Keith Smart going out to work with Dennis Smith Jr. to work with him on his shot and also on his game. And we saw a couple of videos of Dennis Smith Jr. putting in the work over the summer and taking some shots. And then when the season began, it was like Dennis Smith Jr. was just like I'm not sure what happened to the person that was the person that was here last year towards the end of his first season with the Knicks. There was a lot to be desired in his game even back then, but he played with some confidence. He was bouncy and excited to be here. And this year he just was not excited. It's almost like there was something wrong. And I just felt like he had a lot to do maybe with his shot. He just was not comfortable with the changes they had to make to his game. And sometimes I've played basketball. I wasn't a very good basketball player. I was just barely average. And I do know one thing: when there's something, when you introduce a new motion, like a new shooting form to your game, it can really affect a lot of things. It can affect because basketball, you're supposed to just play. Your body's just supposed to react naturally, and if there's something off, if there's something you're not comfortable with, there's a motion that is not fluid, that you're not comfortable with, the emotions are not going to be fluid, and then it's going to introduce a lot of hesitation in your game. And it's almost you're going to be like stuck all the time. You're going to be you're just not going to be fast, and you're not going to play smooth and natural. So I think that may have been the big issue for him. I'm not sure exactly what they did to him, but it just was not good. It didn't work, and it felt like it really ruined his young talent. Honestly, the other thing too was that was pretty despicable in my opinion was like some of the fans' reaction to Dennis Smith Jr. his struggles early this year. I don't know about any of you, but I'm over 40 years old. I can remember myself at 19, 20 years old. Just to imagine somebody would boo me and would basically write my story when I was 19, 20 and basically said I was done for. I mean, that's such a laughable. That's so laughable to me. It just doesn't make any sense, And so it was pretty sad to see fans booing him early in the season because he's 19, and I just feel really uncomfortable. I think sometimes we forget that these guys are only 19, 20, 21, 22. And again, I remember myself at that age. It's like guys are so impressionable at that age. We're still pretty young. They're still pretty young at that age, and it's just unfortunate to have an arena full of grown folks just booing 19 and 20-year-olds. That I could never understand. Even though they were chanting for Frank Ntilikina, I still felt that was, I'm a huge Ntilikina fan, but I felt that was extremely inappropriate. I just wasn't for that. And for me, I think for these young guys, it's really about the coaching and development plan that they have for them. If you have a good coach and a good development plan, and these guys do want to work, and from what I've seen, I think these guys want to be here and they want to work. And so these guys should, if we have a good coach with good development plan, these guys should be pretty good. They should be pretty good. They should have good NBA careers. and I think they will have huge impact on the Knicks and or whatever team they play for, as long as we get they have good coaching and they develop properly. And so, and like I said before, Dennis Smith Jr. was just like I was very shocked in the steps backwards that he took. And so, and I kind of laid that at the feet of not just the coach, but also Scott Perry's the GM, and he's supposed to know all things about players and help make sure he sets up the team right, set these guys up for success. And it doesn't look like they did that. And then from some of the videos I've watched, like from other videos like Knicks Fan TV and Nothing But Knicks, and I've heard things like they didn't have even like a robust player development team, and they were very understaffed in that department. So, and so I guess I wasn't surprised in the output that we got on the floor, because these guys, the young guys, really struggled during the second year. So the other person that I was that I was pretty disappointed by was I was really disappointed with the performance of Kevin Knox. I mean, his true shooting percentage did improve a little bit this year. I think his 3-point shooting also did improve this year. But I kind of felt that, and also honestly, I felt like at times his defense was a little better. He kind of gets a little lost sometimes, but his defense did improve. I felt like the defense improved a little bit this year. My big issue with Kevin Knox was and how he was handled was more with I kind of felt like he probably should have gotten a little more minutes. I feel like he should have gotten more minutes. And then the other issue I had too was, I kind of questioned their development plan for Kevin Knox. What did he do over the summer, to work on his game? And the other thing I also I kind of questioned them drafting Kevin Knox, right? And one of the reasons why I questioned that was because if you look at Kevin Knox, his percentages from college, it wasn't like Kevin Knox. I'm not sure why everyone is so sure Kevin Knox is going to be this great shooter, but if you look at his track record, it doesn't bear that out. Even in college, he shot around 34% from three, and I think he was in the 30s. He shot did he shoot in the 30s for field goal? I'm not sure, but just looking at his 3-point shooting alone, it was 34% from in college, and normally, I think when you come into the league, that normally drops. So unless you really work hard on it, your 3-point shooting tend to drop. And also, if you look at his free throw shooting, he shot 69% from the free throw line, and he wasn't a great free throw shooter when he was in college either. So the decision to draft him, I wonder if that decision was around them thinking he was going to be a great 3-point shooter. And we all loved his form. He's got a great looking form, but having a great looking form doesn't mean you're going to be a great 3-point shooter. That's just I think that is just something a lot of us basically believe in. And I also believe in it too, sort of. When I see him shoot, it's the nice looking stroke. A lot of people love his form. But honestly, he's had that form since he was in high school. And if you look up his high school stats, I'm pretty sure he probably shot in the low 30s from three as well. But when he was in college, he shot 34% from three, and he's shooting 69% from the free throw line. So I'm not sure if Kevin Knox is going to be a great 3-point shooter ever in the future. I hope he becomes a little better than average, maybe get it up to 37%. He can do that. I think that would be great. I think what they really need to focus on is probably, as far as going back to his development plan, they should have focused on every other part of his game, being able to drive to the basket and make plays for other players. Maybe, I know everyone doesn't like the post moves, but he is a pretty big, tall dude. When they put him on smaller players, maybe they should work on his post moves. So if there's a smaller player guarding him, he can take advantage of that smaller player in the post. So I think they have to work on other parts of his game. But as far as picking him, I'm not sure if it was actually the best choice. It wasn't a terrible choice because of where we were picking, but I'm not sure if it was the best choice. So let's take a look at everyone that was drafted. That was basically drafted after Kevin Knox, and we can look at their. Let's take a look at their performance. This is basically all the players. Well, not all the players, but we're looking at 1 to 18. First to 18 players drafted in 2018. This is their NBA statistics since they've been drafted. And if we take a look at Kevin Knox, he was drafted 9th, and since he came into the league, he He's been shooting 36% from the field and 33% from three. Free throw percentage is about 69-70%. Right? His points average per game did decline this year because of the lack of minutes. So overall, he's been averaging about 9 points per game. But if you look at the other players that were drafted after him, the one right after him was Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges was a little older, so he was more NBA ready. He's not averaging that many points. But if you look at his field goal percentage and 3-point percentage and also his free throw percentage, it looks like Mikal Bridges is going to end up being a better 3-point shooter, possibly than Knox will be in the future. And his true shooting percentage looks like it's above the league. It looks like I don't have the number here in front of me. I'm just estimating, but it looks like the true shooting percentage is going to be above 55%. And so the next one after that, obviously, was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. We all know, what he's been doing even since he was drafted. He did great while he was with the Clippers, and he's continued to do great work to perform very well with OKC. So right off the bat, you do have two players that have been playing a little better than Kevin Knox. Honestly, Mikal Bridges is averaging less points. I get it, but he is more efficient and he is a better defender, and he is starting on his team on a team that contended for the playoffs. So the other player at 12 was Miles Bridges. Miles Bridges, I don't think it's although he's a little more efficient and he is more efficient than Kevin Knox at the moment. I'm not sure if he's going to end up being a better player than Kevin Knox. So that's kind of a toss up there. And then the other big name, if you go down, skip 13, let's go down to 14, Michael Porter Jr. I mean, that's the big one. Everyone, I think half of the Knicks fans wanted Michael Porter Jr., but we don't know what the GM knew. Obviously, he had issues with the neck, and we don't know if he's even going to have a long NBA career. So it would be tough for the Knicks to go. We kind of give the Knicks a pass on not picking Michael Porter Jr. because we don't know what's going to happen with this kid's career. If he's going to end up having a very long, healthy career. But if you go down further down, there's actually two players, 17 and 18. Believe it or not, their points per game it's lower, but it's because they didn't get a lot of minutes their first year, but they're getting more minutes their second year, and I have a feeling they're going to do very well in the future. The first one was DiVincenzo. He plays for the Milwaukee Bucks. He was drafted out of Villanova. Very good 3-point shooter. Kid is a little bouncy. But, he's been playing better. He's been getting more minutes and been playing better. But I think they brought him along slowly because, honestly, he was in a great veteran team that had a lot of great players. And so it was going to be very difficult for him to crack, to get playing time. And if you look at DiVincenzo, the player, at 17, I mean, he has been struggling from three, but if you look at his field goal percentages at 44%, so it insinuates that he's a thoughtful player and he's picking his spots, and so he has better shot selection. If you compare his field goal percentage to Kevin Knox, it just kind of insinuates that he has a better shot selection than Kevin Knox. I was saying he's more patient and he's not pressing it. The other person on the list for me, I think that may actually, I would not be shocked if he ends up being better than Kevin Knox and Lonnie Walker. He did have some injury issues. He's had some history with some injury issues. And it looks like the Spurs brought him on very slowly his first year. He didn't get much minutes his first year. Again, it was a good veteran lineup, and the Spurs, they tend to do that with a lot of their young players. They tend to bring them up slowly. But this year, I noticed in the bubble, he has been starting. He started all the games in the bubble. He's a very interesting player. He doesn't press. Sometimes when you see this kid go, he always looks like the best player on a court when he has the ball in his hands. And so, I think people need to look out for this kid 2 years from now when Popovich is ready to hand the reins off to him. I think this kid, everybody's gonna be like, where did they find this kid? But Lonnie Walker, he's a very good player out of Florida, Miami and Florida, and his field goal percentage 42%, not that great, but his 3-point shooting was at 40%, which is really good. So his true shooting percentage is probably closer to the league average, probably close to possibly even above 55. But so that's for me. I think that's the players. These are the players that I think that may end up being possibly better than Kevin Knox. But right now, we're not sure. But I do think Lonnie Walker is going to end up being a very good player. Obviously, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander right now is the better player. First of all, his true shooting percentage is close to 60, probably 60%. So he's a much better player than Kevin Knox. But the rest of them, I think we don't know what's going to happen with the rest of them, really. Michael Porter Jr. He's looking great now, but we don't know what's going to happen to him 2-3 years from now. If it would have been worth taking him with the ninth pick. So going back to the question, now we talked a lot about go back to the question, which is should the Knicks have kept Scott Perry on as general manager? And to do that, we talked a lot about the coaching decision that they made to hire David Fizdale, and not just about even hiring David Fizdale, but honestly, I felt like they waited too long to get rid of David Fizdale. I think they were afraid what it would have looked like to get rid of David Fizdale within the first year, but they were huge red flags, and it just I know it would have made the organization look really bad, but they were really huge red flags in the first year. So keeping David Fizdale really set the organization back tremendously. And obviously, we had the huge decision that we didn't talk about the KP trade and bringing and getting Dennis Smith Jr. back from the trade. Obviously, that is something huge that set the organization back as well. But it's just something I didn't really want to talk too much about because I felt like a lot of the bad blood came prior to prior to Scott Perry being here, and I think a lot of that was ruined by KP not just seeing how they treated Carmelo Anthony, but also how they treat the other vets. You look at Charles Oakley, you look at Joakim Noah. It seems like every solid, really good vet that comes to the Knicks, it's the past few years they've been leaving in disgrace. Carmelo was the biggest one. The fact that Carmelo left in disgrace was not a good look, and I think that had a huge impact on how KP felt about the organization. And so, so I didn't want to really rehash that. I understand, people felt they could have gotten a lot more back for KP, and so I mean it's I probably should have put it as a factor on this decision, but I just wasn't sure. I just wanted to talk about the coaching decision and the player development as a whole. I didn't want to really get into a player that wasn't here anymore. But right now, not David Fizdale, but Scott Perry is currently still the general manager of the team. And it looks like for me, his strengths are really more in scouting. Right? It seems like he has a knack for putting together a draft. And so if we look at his draft, since he's been here, he picked up his first draft was Kevin Knox, Mitchell Robinson, and Alonzo Trier. So that was, you can give him a B for that draft, right? Mostly because the reason why we give him a B because we don't know what's going to happen really in the future. I mean, we really can't grade it. It's really hard to grade it right now. So we're just going to be safe and give him a B for that first draft. The second one, his second draft was pretty. It was pretty easy to figure out. There wasn't really anyone else after the first two guys went off the board. R.J. Barrett was the natural pick at that position. But I am happy they did get that correct. They did get that right. But if you look at the second person that they drafted, Brazdeikis, I like him. He looks pretty good. But then